Target acquired.
27 Navy SEALs had attempted the boat-to-shore precision test.
Copy that.
27
Moving to
had
intercept.
failed to meet minimum standards. The scoring board showed nothing but red marks, miss after miss, failure after failure. The elite warriors who could operate anywhere in the world couldn't master this one critical skill. Master Chief Torres stared at the board, his jaw clenched with frustration. 15 years training the world's most elite operators, and this maritime marksmanship qualification was breaking his team. The choppy waters of San Diego Bay mocked them with each rolling wave. Then she picked up the rifle and said quietly, "Mind if I give it a shot?" Every head turned. The contractor they'd barely noticed for 3 weeks. The woman with the clipboard who tracked equipment and updated inventory sheets. What happened next rewrote the record books and forced everyone to question what they thought they knew about precision shooting. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing for more tales of unrecognized heroes. Her name was Sophia Reynolds, and she had been assigned to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado for exactly 21 days. As a civilian contractor specializing in maritime equipment logistics, she was responsible for maintaining inventories of specialized gear used in water-based operations. It was methodical work that kept her largely invisible to the SEALs who trained around her daily. The Maritime Marksmanship qualification had been instituted 6 months earlier following operational failures where SEALs needed to engage targets from unstable platforms in rough seas. The test required shooters to fire from a small boat bouncing in harbour swells, hitting targets on a distant pier with precision that demanded not just marksmanship skills, but an understanding of maritime dynamics that most land-based operators had never needed to develop. Master Chief Raymond Torres, a 23-year veteran who had trained thousands of SEALs, watched from the pier as another attempt ended in failure. The test parameters were unforgiving. 6 shots at targets 300 meters away, fired from a Zodiac boat in active swells, with a minimum score of 85% required for qualification. What made the test particularly challenging wasn't just the distance or the moving platform. It was the complex interaction of multiple variables that changed constantly: wave timing, wind patterns affected by the harbor's geography, the boat's natural roll cycle, and the way different shooters' body weight distribution affected the craft's stability. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell emerged from the latest failed attempt, saltwater spray still dripping from her gear. Her expression carried the frustration of someone accustomed to excellence who had encountered an apparently insurmountable challenge. "The boat's movement pattern is unpredictable," she reported to Torres. "Just when you think you've timed the roll cycle, a crosswave changes everything. And the target oscillation from heat distortion over the water makes range estimation nearly impossible." Torres nodded grimly. Mitchell was one of his best instructors, a proven combat veteran with multiple deployments. If she couldn't master this qualification, he was beginning to wonder if the test parameters were realistic for operational requirements. Petty Officer First Class David Chen, the next candidate, had spent the previous evening studying wave pattern charts and meteorological data, trying to find some edge that would help him succeed where others had failed. His analytical approach had made him one of the most precise marksmen in the team during land-based qualifications. Chen's attempt lasted 4 minutes. From her position near the equipment shed, Sophia watched through binoculars as he struggled with the same challenges that had defeated every previous candidate. His shots grouped well for someone firing from an unstable platform, but well wasn't good enough for the standards required. When Chen returned to the pier, his expression mirrored the disappointment that had become familiar over the past 3 weeks. "I can read the waves, time the swells, compensate for wind," he said, pulling off his protective gear. "But there's something happening out there that I can't account for. Some variable I'm missing." Torres assembled the remaining candidates for a briefing that carried an undertone of ultimatum. "Gentlemen, this qualification isn't optional. Maritime precision shooting is a mission-critical skill. Command has made it clear that units unable to meet these standards will face operational limitations that affect deployment readiness." The gathered SEALs understood the implication. Failure to master this skill could impact their team's mission assignments, potentially sidelining some of the most elite operators in the military because of one specialized requirement. Sophia continued her inventory work, checking off items on her clipboard while unconsciously listening to the discussion. She had been observing the qualification attempts for weeks, noting patterns in the failures that the candidates themselves seemed to miss. Her background had given her insights into maritime shooting that she kept to herself, having learned early in her contractor role that offering unsolicited advice to military personnel was rarely welcomed. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Johnson stepped forward for the next attempt. A veteran of multiple SEAL deployments, Johnson had earned a reputation for adaptability and problem-solving under pressure. If anyone could crack the code of this qualification, Torres believed it would be Johnson. Johnson's pre-shot routine was meticulous. He studied the wave patterns for several minutes, timing intervals between swells, and noting how the boat responded to different sea states. His approach was methodical, professional, and ultimately unsuccessful. The boat returned with Johnson wearing the same expression of frustrated competence that had marked every previous attempt. "Chief, I don't understand it," he admitted to Torres. "I've fired from platforms in Afghanistan that were being mortared. I've made precision shots under stress that should have been impossible. But something about this maritime environment is different." Torres was beginning to share Johnson's bewilderment. These weren't rookie shooters struggling with basic marksmanship principles. These were elite operators who had demonstrated exceptional shooting abilities in combat environments. Yet this particular test was defeating them systematically. Sophia finished updating her equipment manifest and prepared to return to the logistics office. As she passed near the group of frustrated SEALs, she overheard Johnson describing his experience to the others. "The timing is what's killing us," Johnson explained. "You think you've got the wave cycle figured out, but there's an interference pattern happening. Something's affecting the boat's movement in the ways that don't match the visual wave conditions." That's when Sophia stopped walking. Johnson's description confirmed what she'd been observing from shore. The candidates were trying to time their shots to visible wave patterns, but they were missing a crucial factor that affected their platform's stability. Torres noticed Sophia standing nearby and nodded politely. As a contractor, she was part of the base community, but the training operations weren't her responsibility. He was about to continue his debrief when Sophia spoke quietly. "Mind if I give it a shot?" The words seemed to hang in the air. 27 failed attempts by Navy SEALs, and now a civilian contractor was asking to try. Several of the operators exchanged glances that ranged from amused to incredulous. Torres studied Sophia carefully. He had worked with contractors for years and had learned to respect their specialized knowledge in their areas of expertise. But marksmanship wasn't equipment logistics. "Ma'am, this is a specialized military qualification," Torres replied diplomatically. "The parameters are designed for combat scenarios that require specific training and experience." "I understand that, Chief," Sophia said, her voice remaining calm and respectful. "But I've been watching the attempts for 3 weeks. I think I know why everyone's missing." Johnson stepped forward, his curiosity overcoming his skepticism. "What do you think we're missing?" Sophia set down her clipboard and approached the group. "You're all timing your shots to the wave patterns you can see, but you're not accounting for the subsurface current that runs through this part of the bay. It creates a secondary motion in the boat that's about 3 seconds out of phase with the surface waves." The SEALs stared at her. Torres raised an eyebrow. "How do you know about subsurface currents?" "Before this contract, I spent 8 years with the Coast Guard," Sophia replied. "Maritime interdiction specialist. When you're trying to board moving vessels in rough seas, you learn to read water conditions that most people can't see." The revelation changed the dynamic immediately. Coast Guard maritime interdiction was respected throughout the naval community as requiring exceptional boat handling skills and precision shooting under challenging conditions. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell stepped forward. "What kind of shooting did you do with the Coast Guard?" "Drug interdiction operations," Sophia answered. "Disabling boat engines from moving platforms, often in sea states worse than this. Sometimes we had to make precision shots to stop vessels without harming personnel on board." Torres felt his assumptions shifting. This wasn't a contractor making casual observations. This was someone with specific operational experience in exactly the type of maritime shooting his SEALs were struggling to master. "The subsurface current you mentioned," Chen said, his analytical mind engaging with the new information. How does that affect shooting solutions? Sophia gestured toward the bay. The current runs northeast through this channel. It's subtle, but it creates a consistent pull on any boat that's not actively compensating. Your timing looks right for the surface waves, but the boat's actually moving through a different rhythm underneath. Johnson nodded slowly. That would explain the inconsistency. We're compensating for one motion while experiencing another. Exactly, Sophia confirmed. The trick is to feel the boat's actual movement, not just what you see on the surface. Your inner ear tells you more than your eyes do in this situation. Torres made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. All right, Reynolds, if you want to demonstrate, I'll authorize it. But understand that this is a Navy SEAL qualification standard. The minimum score is 85%. Sophia nodded. I understand, Chief. As she prepared for the attempt, the mood on the pier had transformed from frustration to intense curiosity. Word spread quickly among the base personnel that a civilian contractor was attempting a qualification that had defeated every SEAL who had tried it. Sophia's preparation was notably different from the elaborate routines the SEALs had used. Instead of extensive visual study of wave patterns, she spent several minutes with her eyes closed, seemingly listening to something the others couldn't hear. What's she doing? Whispered one of the younger SEALs. Learning the water's rhythm, replied Johnson, who was beginning to understand that Sophia's approach came from a different kind of training entirely. When Sophia opened her eyes, she walked to the boat with a confident stride that suggested complete familiarity with maritime operations. Her movements as she boarded the Zodiac were fluid and practiced, showing none of the careful uncertainty that had marked even the most experienced SEAL's approaches. Torres operated the boat's controls while Sophia positioned herself for the shooting sequence. As they moved into position, she made small adjustments to her stance that accommodated the boat's movement in ways that seemed instinctive rather than calculated. Whenever you're ready, Torres called out, but Sophia was already settling into a shooting position. Her posture was relaxed but stable, working with the boat's motion rather than fighting against it. From the pier, the assembled SEALs watched through binoculars as Sophia began her sequence. Her first shot seemed to be fired at a moment when the boat was clearly moving, yet the distant target indicated a hit. How did she time that? Mitchell asked, lowering her binoculars. The second shot followed quickly, again fired at what appeared to be an unstable moment, but resulting in another confirmed hit. Sophia's rhythm was completely different from the careful, measured approaches the SEALs had attempted. By the fourth shot, even the most skeptical observers were recognizing that something unprecedented was happening. Sophia wasn't fighting the water conditions, she was using them. Her shots followed a pattern that seemed to anticipate the boat's movement rather than react to it. The sixth and final shot rang out across the bay, and Torres confirmed the hit before beginning the return trip to the pier. The silence among the watching SEALs was profound. When the boat reached the dock, Sophia stepped off with the same casual confidence she had displayed boarding. She handed the rifle back to Torres and waited for the official scoring. Torres consulted his spotting scope data and scoring sheets. When he looked up, his expression carried a mixture of respect and disbelief. 6 for 6, he announced. Perfect score. The pier erupted in a combination of cheers and stunned conversation. In 3 weeks of attempts by Navy SEALs, no one had achieved even the minimum passing score. Sophia had just delivered a flawless performance. Chen was the first to approach her. How did you time those shots? You were firing when the boat was clearly unstable. Sophia smiled. I wasn't timing the instability. I was using it. When you stop fighting the water and start working with it, the boat's movement becomes predictable. The current creates a rhythm you can feel if you're not overthinking the visual cues. Johnson shook his head in amazement. We were trying to shoot between the waves. You were shooting with them. Maritime shooting isn't land shooting from a moving platform, Sophia explained. It's a completely different discipline. The water is part of the shooting system, not an obstacle to overcome. Torres stepped forward, his professional respect evident. Reynolds, I owe you an apology. I underestimated your qualifications based on your current job assignment. No apology needed, Chief, Sophia replied. I'm here to do equipment logistics, not train seals. But I couldn't watch good operators struggle with something I might be able to help with. Mitchell approached with obvious curiosity. Your Coast Guard experience. What kind of operations were you involved in? Caribbean drug interdiction primarily, Sophia answered. Fast boats, rough seas, precision shooting requirements similar to what you're training for here. Different mission parameters, but the shooting challenges were comparable. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Robert Hayes, the training officer who had been monitoring the qualification attempts. He had observed Sophia's perfect performance from the range tower and was clearly interested in understanding what had just occurred. Chief Torres, Hayes said, approaching the group. I need a full debrief on what just happened here. Torres straightened to attention. Sir, Contractor Reynolds demonstrated the Maritime marksmanship qualification and achieved a perfect score. Hayes studied Sophia with the calculating look of someone reassessing previous assumptions. Reynolds, what's your background? 8 years Coast Guard, sir. Maritime interdiction specialist. Currently civilian contractor for equipment logistics. And you've been observing our training difficulties? Yes, sir. The candidates have been struggling with timing issues related to subsurface current effects on boat stability. Hayes nodded slowly. How long would it take you to teach that technique to our operators? Sophia considered the question. The principles can be explained in a few hours, sir. But developing the feel for water conditions takes practice. Probably a week of focused training for operators with this skill level. Chief Torres, Hayes said, turning to the Master Chief. I want you to work with Reynolds to develop a training protocol that incorporates her techniques. This qualification requirement isn't going away, and we need our people to master it. Torres nodded. Aye, sir. Reynolds, are you willing to assist with instruction development? Sophia looked around at the assembled SEALs, seeing respect where there had been skepticism minutes earlier. I'd be honored to help, Chief. Over the following days, Sophia worked with Torres to redesign the Maritime marksmanship training program. Her approach emphasized understanding water conditions through sensory awareness rather than visual observation alone. She taught the SEALs to feel the boat's movement patterns and work with the water's rhythm instead of fighting against it. The transformation in performance was dramatic. Within a week, operators who had failed multiple attempts were achieving passing scores. By the end of the second week, the average score had improved by 40%. Chen, who had become one of Sophia's most dedicated students, achieved his qualification on his first attempt using her methods. It's like learning to see underwater, he told his teammates. Once you understand what the water is really doing, everything else makes sense. Johnson, whose analytical nature had initially worked against him in the maritime environment, found that Sophia's techniques gave him a framework for applying his methodical approach effectively. His qualification score exceeded the minimum by a comfortable margin. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, working with Sophia to understand the instructional methodology, was impressed by the depth of knowledge that came from operational experience. Your Coast Guard training covered aspects of maritime operations that we don't teach in SEAL School, she observed. Different mission sets require different specializations, Sophia replied. Coast Guard interdiction work happens in conditions that would ground most military operations. We had to develop techniques for shooting in weather that was considered unsafe for training. Commander Hayes visited the training program during the second week to observe the improved performance. He watched Chen achieve a near-perfect score on what would have been his 8th attempt using the previous methods. Reynolds, Hayes said after the demonstration, I'm recommending you for a formal instructor position. Your current contract allows for reassignment to training duties if both parties agree. Sophia considered the offer. Sir, I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm not sure I'm ready to transition from contractor to instructor status. Why not? This kind of specialized knowledge works best when it comes from operational experience, she replied. I can teach the techniques I know, but your SEALs will develop their own innovations that go beyond what I can show them. Hayes nodded, understanding her perspective. Fair enough, but I want your input on any future maritime training program development. 3 months later, the Maritime marksmanship qualification had become one of the most reliably passed requirements in the SEAL training pipeline. Sophia's techniques had been incorporated into the standard curriculum, and failure rates had dropped to less than 5%. Torres, reflecting on the transformation, approached Sophia as she completed her final equipment inventory before her contract ended. "Reynolds, I've been training SEALs for over 2 decades. What you accomplished here changed how we think about specialized skills training." "I just shared what I knew, Chief," Sophia replied. "Your operators did the hard work of adapting it to their mission requirements." "No," Torres said firmly. "You saw a problem that experienced instructors missed, and you had the courage to speak up. That's not just sharing knowledge, that's leadership." Sophia's final day at Coronado was marked by an informal ceremony where the SEALs she had worked with presented her with a plaque recognizing her contribution to their training program. The inscription read, "To Sophia Reynolds, who taught Navy SEALs to shoot like Coast Guard." Johnson, speaking for the group, expressed their appreciation. "Reynolds, you showed us that expertise comes in many forms. We'll remember that lesson in every maritime operation we conduct." As Sophia departed Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, she left behind more than just improved qualification scores. She had demonstrated that the most valuable knowledge often comes from unexpected sources, and that true expertise is recognized not by rank or position, but by results. The Maritime Marksmanship program continued to benefit from her innovations long after her departure. New SEAL classes learned her techniques as standard curriculum, and the principles she taught influenced training development throughout the Naval Special Operations community. From the choppy waters of San Diego Bay to training facilities around the world, Sophia Reynolds' story became a reminder that sometimes the person everyone overlooks is exactly the one who can solve the impossible problem. Her perfect score hadn't just rewritten the record books, it had rewritten how the Navy's most elite warriors understood the relationship between expertise and experience. Because sometimes, mastery isn't about who has the most advanced training. Sometimes it's about who has learned to work with forces that others only fight against.